Conquer the Noise is a podcast produced by Unconquered, an independent agency challenging brand perspective through redefined content. This podcast is dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. Hello, how is everyone? I hope you're all doing great. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm opening this episode with just a quick note or a quick change. Reilly Brock is no longer with Imperfect Foods, but we think he did such a great job on this episode providing insights and key takeaways for helping with your brand storytelling that we want to run with it anyway. Imperfect Foods is a DTC brand that was founded to fight food waste by finding a home for the imperfect or ugly fruits and vegetables that farms can't sell to grocery stores. This is one of my favorite subjects, and we'll be diving into how you can reduce food waste in your own home, their efforts to create a sustainable business, while talking through the role a creative director has and how Reilly uses creativity to educate consumers. Reilly, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time. Where are you calling from today?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Always happy to chat sustainability and food. I'm calling in today from West Berkeley, California.
Oh, I love California. Have you been out there your whole life? Did you grow up there?
Pretty much. I was born in DC, but we moved out here when I was 6, and I've pretty much lived here ever since. I went to college in Ohio and then came back after graduation.
Okay. So now you're working as Associate Creative Director at Imperfect Foods. I think Creative Director, that title has just sort of a mystery to folks who don't necessarily work in the creative services business or work within marketing. So for people who aren't familiar with what that is at home, what is a creative director, an associate creative director? What do you do? What are your roles, responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it really comes down to storytelling. I see my job and my role as helping our brand story come to life across a variety of touch points. And that might be something really small, like a tweet or a sentence you might read on our website, but it might be something huge, like a campaign you see out in the world or a billboard or even a podcast episode like this, right? So I really see creative direction as helping the brand story come to life in a really three-dimensional, fun, engaging way for folks, so that anyone following the brand, whether they're a customer or not, knows who we are, what we stand for, and why our mission matters.
Yeah, I think my definition of creative director or that role is consistently evolving and changing and morphing. And, very early on in my career, where I was working as a photographer, I was very much on the visual side. I very much thought of creative direction from, what is it going to look like? What's the mood? Why? And therefore didn't necessarily consider as much of the written word. And then the more I dig into it, the more and more creative direction is really based in communicating and writing and storytelling, like you're saying. So I think it's a really great point. But before you did all this, you weren't necessarily working as a writer or creative director. You had an early stint in kitchens in San Francisco. How did that set you up for what you're doing now? I feel like that's such a great combination to go from working in the food industry to creative direction, now working for a great company who works within that space.
Yeah, I've definitely had, I guess, what you could charitably call an eclectic career. I had kind of a first act as a young culinary professional. So I started a food cart in college, selling late night tacos outside of parties, and it was a trip. It was a journey. It was difficult. It was up late, cooking tacos and scrubbing pans and stuff, but it was also really educational. Nothing is quite as visceral as cooking, right? It's a very visceral line of work, very kind of body movement based. You're going fast. There's a lot to manage and juggle. You're kind of constantly going through these mental flow charts of what you have to do next and what you can be doing to maximize your time and your space. And that really led me on a couple-year journey. So the food cart, and then I apprenticed in Europe for a couple months at a restaurant in Madrid. And then, landed back here in the Bay Area. I was worked at a couple different kitchens here. I was at Mission Chinese Food for about 2 years. And it was really educational. As I said, such a whirlwind type of profession. And I was following my passion for food, the whole time. That's what got me into it. And, I was just, as a younger person, just really into learning the recipes and the moves and what went into all these dishes and the ingredients and how to pair them together. I think I ultimately realized the lifestyle was tough. It was tough to be sustainable with those hours and those days. And, you're working when all your friends are playing and vice versa. So you don't see much of your friends or your family. It's pretty hard to have a social life or a romantic life when you're in kitchens full time. And I really feel like people that do it as their full-time calling, they just have to know, because it kind of eclipses everything else happening in your life. And I came to a point around 24 years old where I had done it for a while, and I kind of was at an inflection point where I either had to go all in and like go to the next level and trying to climb the ladder, or realize like, hey, this wasn't for me. And I had some kind of candid conversations with myself and friends and family and decided I like this, but I don't love it enough to dedicate all of the time it will take for me to be an incredible cook and chef. And because of that, I kind of had a pivot then into first event planning and then content marketing. And in a way, it seemed kind of odd at first, but what I was looking for was a way to marry my passion for food with my passion for storytelling and communications. I'd always loved reading and writing and storytelling and kind of the written word and, entertainment as a kid and a younger person. And, I was a sociology major in college. So I was kind of looking for that role where I could marry this like narrative analytical mind with the passion and interest for food. And when I found the role at Imperfect, at that time they were hiring for someone to do social media. It seemed just like a really natural fit. And kind of the rest is history from there.
So Imperfect Food, one of their big things, or you should say your big things over there is really maximizing the food production line, reducing food waste. And I had to say there's got to be a connection there too, even to the kitchens. I know, at the very bottom line, it's just that for restaurants. You got your food costs, trying to keep your food costs down as much as possible, reusing everything that you can. Did that play in? Has that played that sort of psychological approach to working in a kitchen and play over to Imperfect Food and give you an even better understanding of what you're doing over there and how you can, one, communicate it to the different audiences and to teach other people at home how to do these sort of same waste saving techniques?
Yeah, I'd say it's always there in the background. I mean, what came to mind when you first asked the question was, I had a chef at Mission Chinese that would always kind of get on me if I was not using things efficiently, whether that was time or space, but especially ingredients. If I was lopping off the end of a cucumber and there was like a pretty long chunk that I wasn't using in the pickle dish we were making, he'd be like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you composting it? That's perfectly good. Like only the little, fibrous nubbin at the very end should be tossed. Everything else should be utilized. And so I think, like anyone who works in the service industry, I feel like you have those couple moments of those mentors that kind of live in your brain for the rest of your life. Yeah. So I definitely have that of just always trying to think on my own life, like how can I be a part of minimizing food waste? And then I think one thing I've learned in Imperfect is just looking at the bigger picture and pushing myself to look upstream. And so at Imperfect, it was really eye-opening to like open our walk-in fridge, like when I first started, and to see all of this stuff and think about, wow, like before us, a lot of growers just had trouble selling this. Like they'd have to leave it in the field, or they'd lose money on it, or they'd send it to animal feed, or just all sorts of outcomes that weren't really what they were growing, these eggplants or these tomatoes, these apples for. So that was really eye-opening of just learning, hey, like you got to look upstream, and it kind of, there's always a bigger fish. Like you think you're fighting food waste on one level, you got to keep going and keep unraveling the sweater, because there's probably other arenas where you can make an impact if you want to. And I think the other one is what you brought up at the end, is that all of us make dozens, hundreds of choices every day and every week about how we use food in our homes. And that's where I feel like having a little bit of experience in restaurants and a lot of curiosity and, reading cookbooks and stuff in my spare time can try to be that bridge, right, between kind of the culinary world and the environmental world, between people that care about this kind of part-time and people who are like super passionate, nerds, or have made a profession out of environmentalism and reducing waste. I feel like that's where my role comes into place, being that bridge, right? And showing folks at home, here are some common sense ways you can prevent waste before it starts. Here are some kind of chef-tested, kitchen-tested tips you can use to make the most of your ingredients. And then here are some kind of environmentalist or even activist-driven things you need to be thinking about when you're shopping, when you're storing your food, when you're composting, when you're advocating for composting in your area because it doesn't exist yet, right? Like there's so many different ways one can make an impact on this problem. And I think getting back to your first question, my role is really to be the storyteller and kind of the translator between some of these different worlds and help our customers and the world at large kind of understand, like, what is the scope of this food waste problem? How does stuff on farms play into it? How does stuff that we do in our homes play into it? And how can we all kind of push ourselves to make a bigger impact?
You mentioned the first line, and you said of sort of some of the things you were approaching is like preventing waste before it starts. So that kind of stuck out to me because it immediately made me want to know, what can I do? So do you mind sharing a couple of those tips, what we can do to prevent waste before it even starts?
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the question. It's something I put a lot of time into in my role. We have this wonderful blog called The Whole Carrot, as well as a
Yeah.
Medium page. And so these are these resources we put out there to share this info with people. So I always love people that want to know more. Basically, the top thing with food waste at home is, about 40% of waste in the supply chain is happening in our homes, right? So we all got to look in the mirror when it comes to fixing it. I'd say the top thing is shopping with intention and with a plan. If you look at those things in your life that tend to go to waste, it's often kind of the impulse buys or the stuff that you bought kind of like opportunistically, or kind of it's like hopeful kale purchasing. Have you ever done that?
I'm very guilty of that. I will see something that looks really beautiful or something I really want to try, and I'm like, I get super excited to use it, and then 3 days, 4 days later, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to do it, and it's still sitting there, and it's not peak opportunity, and I'm trying to figure out something else to do with it then. Yeah.
And trust me, I'm guilty of this too. We're all imperfect beings in this regard. It's tough, but I call it aspirational shopping, right? Where you buy a bunch of kale because you're like, oh, kale's really healthy, I got to eat a lot of it. But if you don't have a plan for every single bunch of kale you're bringing home, it's not a recipe for success or for health. It's a recipe for waste, right? And so I think the top thing I tell people is always shop with a list and with a meal plan, a really keen idea of when you're going to use what. And I think going one level further, planning with the shelf life of your ingredients in mind, and literally prioritizing them almost maybe above what you might want to make for dinner, which I realize might sound a little weird, like, what are you babying these tomatoes? But what I mean by that is, for example, herbs are one we hear all the time from our customers that go to waste. And it makes sense. They're really tender. They're really fragile. They're not long for this world. And also, a recipe doesn't often call for the entire bunch. So you're left with this awkward dilemma, like, do you use the whole bunch of parsley? Do you use part of it? How do you store the parsley so it stays fresh longer? And so what I tell people is, if you're bringing home a tender herb like parsley or mint, or let's say one of these leafy greens, like a little gem lettuce or a romaine or something, you really got to kind of prioritize that first. And in restaurants, we'd have stuff in the walk-in that was called like use first, right? It would be right front and center, so that you had to grab it before grabbing that thing that had a longer shelf life. And I feel like that's a principle home cooks can really embody. Again, another restaurant acronym is FIFO. So first in, first out. How you stock and manage your fridge, that plays into waste, right? So in addition to shopping with a list and a plan and really thinking through the shelf life of your ingredients as you bring them in, another thing I advocate for is regularly, I'm talking at least once a month, clean your fridge. Because when you do that, you see very clearly, what are you buying? What are you buying too much of? What are you cooking? What do you have leftovers of? Are the leftovers still good? Can you repurpose them? Or, hey, this batch of tomato sauce is turnt. That's too bad. Take a lesson there, and then, maybe next time scale down the amount you're making. But I found it just in my own life and my own cooking practice to be really humbling and educational. Regularly cleaning my fridge means I know what I have. I have kind of a clean slate to cook and shop from, right? You can, it's easy to stock and cook from a clean fridge. An organized fridge is really kind of messes up your mind. It's really hard to plan around. And then the other thing is just getting those lessons and that real-time feedback of, like, maybe this week, hey, you did a really good job. Like, you bought just enough for the week. Or another week, hey, you really bought like a bunch of meat or cheese or something where you didn't have a plan for it, and it started to get weird and sour. Or, hey, you're buying twice as much milk as you need, or the aspirational kale we talked about earlier. So I'd say, shop with a list and a plan, regularly clean your fridge. And then if you want to take it to the next level, get comfortable with what I call kind of rescue recipes, or kind of cleanup recipes. These recipes where you can absorb excess ingredients from other dishes or other purchases. So stuff like casseroles, stir fries, curries, soups and stews, things that can kind of, frittatas even, they can absorb all of those odds and ends, that motley crew. I'd say that's probably the next level, is like, you're going to over purchase sometimes, but if you look at like a really good home cook or restaurant cook, they're really good at adapting and rolling with the punches.
Yeah, I like to do that with leftovers. I always, from either like restaurants, if there's extra sauces or anything, I always try and bring it home and figure out a way to make it and just improve my own home cooking. Just when sometimes we get the extra quality of a professional chef, and just bring that home to try and reuse it. Herbs, I'm definitely guilty with, and lately I've been trying to cure and dry them if I don't get to them quick enough. So I've rigged them up in my quote office, where they're hanging from hangers, trying to get enough airflow so they don't get moldy, but yet still cured. Do you talk about that at all? Do you have any experience with that, trying to like dry some of your extra herbs so that you can keep them and reuse them longer? I'm just looking for tips for myself here.
For sure.
Being very selfish.
No, it's a great question. And honestly, you're not alone out there. On my podcast on Unwasted, we ask people at the end, one of our closer questions is what is your least favorite thing to waste? And a really common answer is herbs. Like I think it's come up maybe the most of anything. So it's a real struggle out there. I'd say with herbs, you got to think about one key distinction, which is hard herbs versus soft herbs. So hard herbs are woody, herbaceous things like thyme, rosemary, oregano, sage. Those dry really well, and the flavor preserves really well dried. So whether you're shopping for them, you can buy them dried, it's great, or you can dry them yourself really well. And those are also things you can add early in the cooking process because their flavors are quite strong. Stuff like soft herbs, so we call parsley, mint, cilantro, basil, they don't dry as well. Like you can buy them dried, professionally dried basil tastes okay, but a lot of the really complex, lovely things that make it basil or mint or parsley don't really survive the drying process. So I'd say that's like a basic distinction I would throw out for people, that if you're looking to dry your own herbs, like something like thyme or oregano dries quite well. And it's pretty easy to, like you say, just string it up somewhere with a lot of airflow in your house. Like rosemary is a great example. It'll dry out nicely. And it has these kind of piney resins in it that they stay intact as it dries. Something like parsley or basil or mint, that's a lot harder because there's more moisture content and a lot of the flavors are a lot more delicate. It's going to be tough to dry. I would say for that, I'd honestly recommend making like an herb butter or an herb oil instead of.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just do like a little light poach in the oven, like a super low oven, say 250 or 300, and just simmer it in there. And you can make like a garlic and herb butter or garlic and herb oil, and then freeze that, and then you just have a really powerful ingredient on hand at all times. Because half the battle when you're making a soup or a stew or a saute is infusing a flavor in fat. So going with an herbed oil is kind of like cutting out a step in a really fun way.
No, I love that. So you've obviously done a lot of research and spent time educating yourself, and I'm curious to how that translates into like your creative process, and then how that gets distilled down into simple, straightforward, creative that people can easily either identify with or latch on to. I always find it really amazing when you go with this, at least in the advertising world, marketing world, you go from your big strategy, whether it's the brand strategy, product strategy, whatever it is, audience, and then distill all the way down to the creative and then execution. And so I'm just curious what your process is like.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think earlier in my career, I was very kind of asset up thinking, like, because when I started, we were at such a size and velocity where I just had to churn out content, whether it was Instagram posts or tweets or blog posts. It was just about like velocity and kind of keeping the train tracks going to keep telling our story kind of one piece of content at a time. I think as I've gotten older and matured, I've learned what you talked about, that it really should be strategy down. And that takes time, and that takes also people. It's hard when it's just you to be really in the crow's nest strategically, and then also literally in the trenches, in the mines, hacking away, making content. I think if you have a well-balanced team, and I think we're at a point now at Imperfect where we've got some really awesome strategic and organizational thinkers that allow us to think not just like a week or a month ahead, but like, what are we doing next half and next year and that type of stuff. That's when you can really have awesome kind of cross-channel pushes, which are, it takes a lot more time and energy to do, but I think can be a lot more impactful for your customers and for your company as well. I'd say like one part of my strategy I try to remember is all of these content mediums are a two-way street. Like, yes, it's about us communicating to people, but through the analytics and the comments and the feedback, it should also be about us learning from people. So when something maybe doesn't get as much engagement or get some comments that it's like they're not wild about this, like that's a great sign to learn and iterate and adapt. And in turn, when you get comments from your community, let's say on social or blog posts, it's like, hey, I really want to know more about this. Like that's free data. That's great learnings for you as a creative to run with and riff on. And one thing I love, especially about mediums like Instagram, is it's kind of like improv comedy in that way. Like if you want to, you can ask people things one day, learn from it, make content around it, share it the next day, and then just have this conversation almost with your audience. And that's been a really fun part of my process, is especially on the culinary side. We have this series we'll do called Open Kitchen, where we ask people like, hey, what are you struggling to cook this week? Or what questions do you have about salad or pasta or herbs or whatever? And people ask amazing, thoughtful questions. And then I'll, get to be kind of our embedded journalist and go and do some research on it. Or if I know something about it, maybe I'll share. But often I have to go hit the books, do some research, and get smart on, pasta or herbs or salad or whatnot. And that's a really fun and rewarding creative loop for me. And it's also a great way to remain grounded in what are the actual pain points of our customers and our audience, and not just what are my goals for them to hear from us. Yes, it matters. Like, we got to touch on the key things about food waste and new products we're rolling out. But we also have to be really attuned to what are they struggling with, right? Because like you said earlier, like it's not like most people can cook with like potatoes and carrots and stuff that they either have a lot of experience with or there's a lot of recipes for. But for more niche ingredients, like if you just throw someone a rutabaga, like that might take some help, or something that's really perishable, like a fresh herb or an heirloom tomato, like you might need a little bit of finesse there. So I think it's about listening as much as it's about really having a plan and keeping that two-way street open.
So you do a lot of like social listening, and I'm curious to like what you've learned, some of your takeaways. So I think that's one of the most fun things about being a creative director or working within the marketing industries. It gives you an opportunity to constantly learn and search out new things and experiment. And I think it can help you be just a well-rounded person in general, and hopefully a better contributor to the world. And you have a little bit larger understanding of things. But two, I think it's just one of those things that it's an interesting way to connect with people, right? So you've had this opportunity to connect and learn and listen to your audience. And I'm curious if there's anything that's really stuck out to you that has been like an aha moment or something that's really helped you, put the finishing touches on a creative project you're working on, or on a new piece of content that you're working on.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say a realization I've come to lately is, unfortunately, they don't teach you a lot of important things about the environment in school. And what I mean by that is, for example, what to do with all the different numbers of plastics. The numbers you see on the bottom of them.
Yep.
I learned relatively recently what all those numbers mean. And I kind of think if you're going to, like most of us do, buy and use plastic materials every day or every week or every month or whatever cadence you get them on, you should know what they mean, because unfortunately they're not all recyclable, or at least they're not all easily recyclable. That was the humbling truth we arrived at as a brand recently, is, hey, we need to do some education for people. I mean, this started again as a one-off thing around Plastic Free July, but when we're thinking about how to be ethical consumers, like knowing what's in what you're consuming, I would say is like one of the first things you need to know. And unfortunately, it's a really opaque landscape in terms of what all this stuff means. So what the plastic numbers mean, for example, or what you can do with this stuff at home, that requires a lot of teaching. So that was, I'd say, something I've recently arrived at, is just, unfortunately, they don't teach this stuff in school. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, the decisions aren't straightforward. Like, people don't always have great options when it comes to recycling, or let's say composting. Like if you live in an area where there's curbside composting, it's really easy to say, oh, everyone should compost. But if you live in a city where there's no municipal infrastructure for it, it's really hard to say, well, yes, on paper, everyone should compost, but what if you live in an apartment? What if you have a small living space? What if you don't have the time or energy to babysit a compost pile? Or you don't have the space to start one? These all one-size-fits-all solutions kind of break down in practice if people don't have the infrastructure to execute on it. So that's been kind of a learning I've been thinking about lately, is like, people, there's a lot of info that is not common knowledge. Like when we did this plastics numbers thing, it was really awesome to see in the comments that people were really excited about it. Like, I knew this, but I want more people to know it. Or, hey, I did not know this. Like, thank you so much for sharing. Like, where can I learn more about this? So I think that, like, kind of democratizing the knowledge is like, it's a really fun thing you get to do as a mission-driven brand. On the flip side, it's also frustrating on some level intellectually. I'm sad that this isn't just common knowledge to begin with, or that like companies can make it so hard for people to know what to do with their materials. Like, obviously if we lived in utopia, you would not get materials that were hard or impossible to recycle, right? And yet, right now we have this landscape where you're just dealt this buffet of different materials, and it's on you, right? It's on you to figure out what to do with them. And that is tough, right? Because none of us are materials scientists or full-time environmentalists. So it's really hard to have to wade through all that info. So that, again, that's the challenge and opportunity of my role and of a mission-driven company in general, is how do you democratize that knowledge? How do you make the right choice an easier choice to make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I've been reading about the plastics, the different numbers and what they mean as well from a health standpoint. I don't remember which plastics it was or are, but I was reading how some of the chemicals in certain numbers are more water soluble and change based on the temperature of which is being stored, which then in turns transfers those things into the food you eat, and then affects your hormones and just the downward spiral of what happens when you consume some of it. And I was experiencing that same frustration that responsibility shouldn't be falling on people, on the buyers of these things to figure this stuff out. There should be more regulatory things in place from our government to make sure that things we're consuming are safe. I was even reading around some of the coatings they put on the paper straws are really harmful. So you should only be using certain types of paper straws. And that's another thing that I have to figure out, what paper straw can I use? And it's just another thing, and it just doesn't need to be this complicated. And I wish higher ups, when I say higher up, there was more government involvement in consumer advocacy and consumer safety here that would regulate this, so we wouldn't then have to, as business owners, start trying to figure all this stuff out for the business who care, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that their customers are safe. But then it also adds just unnecessary expense to your business, because if you're looking for alternative, something that's not necessarily the mainstream, it's likely going to be more expensive. And then it just becomes a whole nother task. And again, just inflates, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. So where I'm going with this, I know Imperfect Food.
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys. Oh, please do.
Oh, well, can I share an observation and then some good news?
I would love to hear it.
Okay.
I'm always up for good news.
No, I feel like we all are these days, especially on the environmental front. So my observation is, I think what you said is really on the money. And I think I have this pet theory I've been kind of honing recently, which is, I think in America, we worship choice a lot, which is kind of a powerful part of our culture, is we think everyone should have the right to choose between different options, which is great. But something I've realized in large part through my job and learning more about the environment and about our food system, is the real power is not to choose from a menu of options, it's to create the menu of options. And I feel like that's a common fallacy or breakdown, is people think, well, I have power to choose from these options at the store. The real power is the people who choose what ends up at the store, right? Or choose what is not at the store, right? And that was something from really early on in our mission, was realizing there was a bunch of stuff that wasn't even making it to the store for no reason. It was getting left in fields or sent to animal feed or sent to processed food or juicers, or, just falling through the cracks of our food system when it could and should be sold at the store. And so I think that switch has really helped me kind of think about the environment in a different way. That you always have to think upstream, and not only what are the options I have to choose from, but to your point, who's setting the options, right? Because there might be a great option that you're not given, and you can't make a choice that is not presented as an option, right? As an everyday consumer. And that's a tough but important truth, I think, for us all to grapple with. The good news is that a win I have to share is that, we've been getting a lot of feedback in Imperfect, and we take this feedback seriously. People are saying, you got to include less plastic in your boxes. And a common frustration was plastic clamshells for things like cherry tomatoes and strawberries, right? And you go to the store right now, I guarantee if you walk to your nearest grocery store, the strawberries are going to be in a plastic clamshell. It's almost by default, if you never think about it. The sad thing is, those are, I don't want to say impossible, but really difficult to recycle because of the lightweight quality of the plastic. They don't go through sorting machines very well and often just get landfilled. But we found out from our friends at Coke Farms in California, they were trying out cardboard clamshells. And we said, yes, we'd love to try these. And we told our community, hey, we have an option now to get cardboard clamshells. And people were over the moon. It was one of our most engaged with Instagram posts of all time, was basically saying, hey, you asked, we listened, and sharing this little win of, it doesn't have to be by default that you get this single-use plastic into your home. but you do need a critical mass of people to care to make that change. But I'm happy to share that at least with this cardboard clamshell example, we found a way to win. In partnership with a supplier of ours and with a lot of support from the community, we found a way to present a better default option, right? That we could have a cardboard clamshell that's much easier to recycle than the plastic one. And again, that's like a simple shift that actually has a powerful, repercussion throughout the system. But yeah, you gotta be thinking upstream, I think, to really make the biggest impact like that.
And one of the things I saw that you all were doing, and I thought was pretty cool, was the recycling of the materials, like the cooling materials, like whether it's a cooling bag or the ice packs. I haven't seen that done yet in food delivery. I'm one of those guys who tries every food delivery option there is, new markets, whatever it is. If there's an online direct to consumer option, I'm really curious to how these new companies are like Imperfect is innovating and working on these shared values, right? And I thought that was a really cool development. Now, did that derive from your social listening, or is that more of like a internal choice that you wanted to help streamline and just as you work to continue to just build a more environmentally friendly business?
Both.
Yeah.
We had, ever since I started this company, we've had people that have asked, hey, can you take back the materials you deliver in the things that come in the box? Like, that's been a request since day one. Hey, you got to take back the boxes, the gel packs, the liners, especially once we expanded to full grocery. We got that feedback. And, at times as a company, it can be hard to hear kind of a chorus of people all saying the same thing when it feels like it's not quite within your power to change. But for us, it was, again, we take this stuff seriously, and it was kind of validating and liberating almost to think that, okay, like this is important enough that we should make progress on it. And in tandem with that, our sustainability team had been looking into this for a while and thinking, gosh, we got to give people a better default option here. And again, we're really proud to be, pretty much the first, or really the only company that makes it free and easy to recycle and reuse stuff from your doorstep with these deliveries, right? Because the double-edged sword of delivered food, like you said, is it's very convenient, but usually it comes with a pretty high environmental footprint between the delivery and especially the packaging that comes in it. And so at Imperfect, we were thinking, okay, so what are we delivering to people's doors right now? There's a cardboard box, there's an insulated liner, and there's a refrigerated gel pack. Of those three, the cardboard box is quite easy to recycle. Like curbside recycling takes back cardboard boxes, and they're also quite easy to reuse around the house, to donate food, to help people move. We've had customers do cat forts and kid cottages with their boxes. The sky's the limit there creatively. However, like we talked about earlier with the plastics, insulated liners and gel packs are remarkably hard to reuse around the house. Like you can only use so many refrigerated gel packs.
I have so many in my freezer.
Yes.
It's
and
ridiculous.
It's like Tetris, right? Every time you go to put stuff in your freezer, it's Tetris. And so we wanted to liberate people from the gel pack Tetris, and also the fact that these insulated liners are quite hard to curbside recycle. There are not very many facilities that take them back. And so we did kind of an 80-20 analysis of, look, of what we're giving people, what 20% of it is like 80% of the headache to deal with. And it was really the insulated liners and the gel packs. And so that's where we created a program where now, after we drop off your new delivery, we'll take back your insulated liners and your gel pack. And in tandem with some really great partners across the country, folks like Dispatch Goods, Recyclops, GoBox, a couple others, we're able to reuse and recycle these materials. So we're able to basically bundle up the insulated liners into the quantities necessary to meaningfully recycle them and make them into household goods. And with the gel packs, sanitize them and actually use them in future deliveries. So that's, I think, a real win, creating a circular system where once there was a linear one. And I would be lying if I said it was easy. It was remarkably complicated, and
I bet that's why I asked, because it's got to be difficult. I don't imagine it to be easy.
We have a really great blog post I definitely direct people to, and what we can throw it in the show notes. Basically how I built this, about this program, because it took a lot of time, and it took several different teams at Imperfect, over a year to set up, and it requires our customers to be meaningfully involved every week. But it's a huge win, again, to offer people a better default option where we're able to close the loop on something that used to just be kind of this wasteful thing piling up. And, we don't want people to have to deal with gel pack Tetris and just feeling guilty and saddled with materials they don't know what to do with. So we took it upon ourselves as the company with a little bit more leverage here to say, hey, no, we can handle that. We'll do the heavy lifting for you. You, the consumer, the customer, the community, should not have to make all these hard calculations about what to do with the materials. We'll take that off your hands. Here's how we're going to do it. And the program's been a big success. And right now it keeps about 500,000 pounds of different materials out of the landfill every month. It's projected it's like over 6 million pounds a year. So definitely a win for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love hearing these stories and how they develop, how brands develop and grow and refine. And they're, I think the name Imperfect Foods and the idea of imperfect is brilliant in that, this whole process of becoming more sustainable in our lifestyles is imperfect. Once you think you have a solve, then you realize maybe that solve wasn't quite a solve. It has these other repercussions. And again, like just the imperfect process of trying to find the better alternatives. It's just this ongoing thing. But for you guys, it's evolved. The name it used to be Imperfect Produce, and it's gone into Imperfect Foods. What was that rebrand process like? And what sort of caused the need for the name to change?
Yeah, basically, we had realized two things. One, there was a much bigger opportunity for us to make a positive impact on the food system if we could be a full grocery store. Because really, it wasn't just fruits and vegetables that were going to waste and getting undervalued. There was plenty of packaged goods and other things that were going to waste. So there was a bigger opportunity for us to make an impact outside of just fruits and vegetables. And the other thing was really a demand and an ask from our community. We'd get comments like, I love the fruits and vegetables, but if you offered, for example, eggs or quinoa or olive oil, I wouldn't have to go to the store at all. And that would be both fairly convenient, but also there's an emissions upshot there as well. So we really saw it as a chance to double our impact, to be like a more meaningful part of our customers' lives, but also really take, instead of being like a niche thing where you can supplement your shopping, to potentially replace or be like the majority source of your shopping. Like we really think that has a major potential to reduce the carbon emissions of grocery shopping. So that was the incentive for it. And then, it was fall of 2019, we rebranded as from Imperfect Produce to Imperfect Foods. And it was fun. It was a whirlwind, as anyone who's been involved in branding knows. It's a lot when you change your name and your identity, to both, change all the assets, right? All your different social handles and swag and merch and stuff like that has to change. But also, I think that actually the flip side of it is to let your community know that, yes, while the name is changing, the core of what we do, at least for us, was not changing, right? It was broadening in terms of scope and impact, but the heart of the company of let's reduce food waste and build a better food system for everyone, that was actually getting enhanced. That was getting bigger and better than ever. I think, that for me, that was like a fun messaging project was, okay, like what is the through line here? And like, how can I tell some new stories about the fact that we are recovering packaged foods from going to waste now, but also that kind of the DNA of our company is very much alive and well and still intact here.
And so when you're dealing with packaged food, a lot of times those things have dates on them, right? It's not like an apple that comes with a date on it. I would love to hear how you're working around this concept of like expiration dates. I think expiration dates are one of those things that are kind of controversial in some ways because like I don't follow them. I think there's maybe a suggestion. I take them as a suggestion. My significant other has a really hard time doing it. So we have some battles at the kitchen, at the refrigerator of what we're keeping and what we're not. So how are you dealing with that battle? Because I'm sure that's part of the conversation you're having with your audiences around some of the packaged goods. And if you're not correct, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's a great question. And it's a huge reason food goes to waste, especially in people's homes. And it's a problem. Here's what it boils down to. These dates are almost without exception conservative estimates of peak quality, not hard and fast predictions about food safety. And with the exception of infant formula, they are not uniformly used or regulated by the federal government. They're usually done on the state level, and they vary widely item to item, as you've pointed out. And the other confusing part is there's best by, use by, and sell by all of which mean slightly different things. But again, ironically, none of them are a food safety date. I will caveat this. If you're looking at, for example, deli meat or chicken or seafood or a dairy product, be conservative and be cautious about it, because that stuff can and will turn eventually. Often not as fast as it says on the label. But when you're talking about canned beans or dried quinoa or olive oil and stuff, I'd say this. The date is one piece of data to think about when it comes to, is it still good or not? It is not the only one. And it is not even sometimes the most important one. So what we tell people as Imperfect is use your common sense, your best judgment, your ability to research stuff on the internet, as well as your eyes, your nose, your tongue, to tell if stuff is still good to eat. And again, it's a hard judgment call. And I appreciate the candor of bringing up, like, you have arguments around the fridge about it. It's a common thing, right? And that's okay. Like, it's good to think thoroughly about this stuff. What we don't want is people just pitching stuff because it says, oh, this is best by today. Use your judgment there. Smell it, taste it, look at it. And, again, with some exceptions, like, a lot of this stuff is totally great to eat, weeks and sometimes even months after the date's on the side. So the dates are one piece of data, but again, there are many more you can and should consider when it comes to throwing stuff out. Because unfortunately, right now, confusion around these date labels it's actually a preventable cause of food waste at home.
Exactly. That's always my line of thinking. Is I just hate throwing away food, especially if it's been containers. Then I have to. I don't know. It's just me being lazy. Then I have to empty it out, and then the guilt of having to recycle it. But anyway, I digress. So we're getting on close on time, and there's a couple more questions I would love to ask you before we go. And one is really just around your personal work at I guess it's more of a personal stance at Imperfect, and I'm curious what you're really proud of the work that you've done since you've been there. If there's a certain project or certain education point that you've really worked on, like whether it's a campaign or an article or a story. I would love to hear about it.
That's a great question. I think on a macro level, zooming out, I'm proud of the impact we've been able to have as a company. I started in 2016. The company started in 2015. Since 2015, we've saved over 100 million pounds of food from a lesser outcome. So I think that's huge and definitely worth celebrating. I think the caveat there is that food waste is a multi-billion pound problem every year in the US. So we're still chipping at the tip of the iceberg, but I think we've definitely had a big impact as a company. I'm excited to see the type of impact we can have in the future. I'd say another thing is I'm proud that we haven't just settled with that. I think we could have just said, oh, we're recovering food and that's it. Like, that's all we're going to do in terms of sustainability. But I'm really proud that actually as a company, we've asked ourselves the hard questions and say, for example, how can we do delivery better? And, since the beginning, we've embraced this really efficient, dense delivery route model that means that we're able to emit less than on-demand delivery. And even then our customers driving to the store by themselves. So basically our last mile delivery model avoids about 12,000 tons of CO2 emissions. So that's huge, right? So I'm really proud of that we've really been able to make a big impact on reducing food waste, but also not settle for just food waste. We're also thinking about material waste. So in 2020 alone, for example, over 70% of our material waste was diverted from landfill, right? So we're talking about really composting across the board and setting up really robust recycling programs, and like we talked about before, the packaging return program. So I think I'm really proud of that we've just been able to push ourselves to make a bigger impact and think about sustainability holistically, because it's always holistic, right? You can't just define it in one realm. Like sustainability, it's a big topic, and it warrants a big and kind of robust answer, especially when the problem of food waste is so big.
And then I guess my last question is you talked about a little bit in the beginning when we were discussing ways to prevent food waste before it starts. And usually from one of the last questions I ask are around like advice you would give to someone or to your previous self. But in this particular instance, I'm curious what advice you'd give your previous self on food waste. Something you didn't know, something you know now that you didn't know then, or I'll leave it open, and just something that you think from your expertise and again, your interaction with such a large consumer base, consistently seeing the same question over and over again, what's a piece of advice you could address there?
Yeah, I'd say something my boss often tells me is progress, not perfection, which I think applies to your work life, but especially your life in terms of the environment. So don't beat yourself up if you mess up. We all mess up. There's a quote from Zero Waste Chef Anne Bonneau that I really love, which is, we don't need one person doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. And so I really would say lean into the imperfection. It's part of our brand, but I'd say also just in general, human to human, we're all imperfect people. And especially like we've talked about today, we have a menu of not always great options with the environment. So cut yourself some slack that it's sometimes you're going to be choosing between options that aren't the best for you, but you do have power and you do have agency. Definitely flex the power and agency you have, obviously in terms of voting with your wallet, but also in terms of voting with your vote and talking to your elected officials and talking to the companies you support and demanding that they do better. As someone who works at a company where we get a lot of questions and comments and demands from people, we do listen to them and we do read them. And when possible, we do make changes around them. So I would say one, like lean into your agency and speak up. I'd say another lesson I've learned I'd give my previous self and anyone listening is, again, always look upstream. It's very easy to be kind of myopic in your approach and say, okay, well, what is right in front of me right now? So as an example, if you're finding that you waste a lot of food at home, which some of us do, and it happens some weeks, I'll waste more food than I want to. There's a dozen ways you can tackle that, right? You can make soups and stews and smoothies like we've talked about to use up the scraps. You can compost what you would be throwing away. You can give it to a friend or a family member. You could have a huge dinner party and use up all the food that you might waste otherwise. However, if the core problem is that you're buying more than you can eat, none of those will really help, or they're kind of Band-Aid solutions. If the real problem is you're buying 12 heads of romaine a week and eating 8 of them, then no amount of like clever romaine salads and smoothies is going to really solve the fact that you might just be purchasing too much. And that's kind of a humbling conversation I think we all have to have, living in a capitalist society, that yes, some days and weeks and months, the plan doesn't work out, or you buy too much, or you don't eat at home as much as you think you will because you're out for some work event or you're traveling or whatnot. So I'd say, again, being honest and compassionate with yourself is a really empowering way to waste less. And I think along with that, look upstream and always ask yourself a couple of follow-up questions, because sometimes the root problem is not what's right in front of you. It's like 1 or 2 behaviors away. And so that's something where in my own life and through the work we've been able to do at Imperfect, I think we're able to have the biggest impact when we look upstream and kind of ask a couple of thoughtful follow-up questions. So yeah, always look upstream. Be humble and honest with yourself, but also be forgiving and loving with yourself, because we're all going to mess up, but we need people to keep going, right? We need people to start one behavior change, like start composting, start recycling differently, or, start cooking differently, shopping differently, and then do more, right? So start somewhere, do more. And kind of that's why I think there can be this kind of virtuous spiral, right? Where you go outwards from one little behavior change, and then 3 changes down the road, you're suddenly making bigger changes with a bigger impact. So, start somewhere, give yourself those little wins early on that keep you going. And then down the road, they might become big wins. You never know.
Or you could just drink one romaine smoothie, and that might completely make you rejudge how much romaine you're buying as a punishment. That could also work, I think.
Yeah,
that would do it for me. Reilly, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I really look forward to what Imperfect Foods has got up its sleeve over the coming years. I commend all the work. I think it's a great business. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you haven't yet, please head over to the Apple Podcast app and leave a review. Reviews are the best way for us to grow our audience, and your feedback matters. If you're interested in being on the show, you can email me, jay@weareunconquered.co. Thanks, and see you next week.